In this video, we are going to be learning all about rubrics, and then we're also going to be learning about the area in your course options called Mastery. To start off for rubrics, we are going to go into our gradebook setup here on the left. And you're going to see on the right-hand side, this is where we can define our grading scales and our rubrics and see any of the ones that are currently being used in our class. I'm going to go ahead and click on rubrics, and you can see I already have some rubrics created here. But to add a new one, I'm just going to go over here on the right-hand side to add, and it gives me the option to add a grading scale or add rubric. I'm going to select add rubric. Now, when I come to the add rubric page, this is going to give me the option to give a title to my rubric, and then it's also going to give me the option of either defining some custom criterion that I'm going to use in my rubric, or I can attach it to different learning objectives. And you're going to see as we move through the course in this tutorial that by adding learning objectives, it's going to link back to the area called Mastery. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to use both features, and then we'll take a look at the end at Mastery and see how that will help populate that Mastery section with the learning standards that we've selected. So I'm going to go ahead and give this rubric a title. I'm just going to call it Testing Out Rubrics. No, that's not very creative. And then here down below, it gives me a column that I can start to define my criteria. So I can give the first criteria a title if I want, and I'm going to say uses pronouns. Okay. In my description area, I'm going to define what they should do or what piece of criteria that they should have. So I'm just going to define what uses pronouns means. This is where you would enter a description. Okay. And then you will see here, you can define which points you are going to be using. So I can say 5, 4. I can add another grading cell here. That's going to give me my 3, 2, 1. Or if I wanted to have 6 different point values to select from, I could add it to the front, change my value to 6, and then you'll see it changes everything else then to the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now, the description of what a 6 means, what a 5 means, those can all be predefined by you. So you can determine what that means. I'm going to say this is excellent. This is great, good, satisfactory, low, and then needs improvement. Okay, so you can define what that means. If you need to add another piece of criteria, you can add that. And again, it'll bring in the grading scale that you had below. You give that a title, that a description. You also have a toggle option right here. So say you want the second piece that you made, you really want to move that to the top. You would actually be able to drag by clicking on these 3 little lines here. I'm not sure if you're able to see that, but there's 3 little lines. And if you just click it with your mouse, hold it and drag it up, you are able to rearrange your criterion. If you would rather use learning objectives as opposed to a custom criteria that you're defining, you can hit the plus sign right here. It's going to bring you all of the learning standards that we have listed here. Now, if there are other learning standards that you would like to use and you're not finding them here, feel free to reach out to the Information Services Department, and we are happy to get those loaded for you. All we need is a Excel spreadsheet. Column 1 just needs to be the learning objective, and then the description of it needs to be in column 2. So as long as we have those 2 pieces of information, we can load those in mass for all users to use. I'm just going to randomly select some standards here. So I'm going to dig in. I want to use this one, and I can click as many as I need and hit add learning objective, and you will see then it added those learning objectives here for me. Okay. Now, when you go to grade, you'll literally just select the cells of points that the student receives in each one. it will highlight it in green. So I'll show you what that looks like in a second. And then it will total up the points for you. So the total possible points for this rubric as it stands with the rows of criteria that I have is 24 points. So that's the total possible points that the student can get if they were to get all 4 of these as a 6. Okay. So then when you're grading the student, as you select them, it will auto total those for you and give you an average for that. I'm going to go ahead and hit create here. Oh, it wants to let me know that I did not add a title. So I'm going to say uses nouns, and I'm just making up some generic ones to use here. Add a description. Okay. And hit create. So now here's my testing out rubrics. It's worth 24 points. If I need to modify it, I can come here and hit edit. If I want to use it in multiple courses, I can copy to another course. So I'm creating it once, copying it to other courses that I want to use. I can delete it if this is not what I want, or I can save it to my resources. Now, later on in this course, we're going to talk about the advantages of resources, but saving it to resources will allow us to use it then in future years in other courses. So I highly recommend using resources. And again, we'll get more into that later on. So now I have my rubric here. What I can do as I start to create materials in my course is I can then use that as the grading scale. So I am going to add an assignment in my course. And I'm going to call this nouns. Okay. I can give it a due date, do all of that wonderful stuff. But here then, under the scale rubric, I have all of the grading scales that I'm using in my class or that are available to me in any of the rubrics that I've created. You also have an option here to create new. So you can either create the rubric from the assignment that you're making, or you can go into your grade setup and create the rubric. Okay, so you can do it from either one of those areas. And you'll see later you can also do it from resources directly as well. So I'm not going to do create new right now. It would just take me up to that window that we just used. But I'm going to go ahead and find my rubric that I created called testing out rubrics. Okay, so I've got my nouns assignment. I'm going to use the scale of testing out rubrics. So I've got my rubric scale. Okay. So now I'm going to go to my gradebook, and let's pretend that a student submitted an assignment via paper. So if I find my assignment, here it is, it's the nouns, and I go to grade it, you'll see when I hover over the grading box, it gives me this little icon right here. That's the rubrics icon. So if I click on that, it's going to bring up that rubric that I created, and now I can grade the student. So I'm going to give them a 6 here, a 6, 4 here, and I'm going to say needs improvement here. So you will see it took all of these numbers that I selected, it checked which ones I chose. So then it totaled up the points. So this student would have a 17 out of 24. I can override this. So if I want to give them some extra credit for something, I could. Or if I wanted to deduct points because maybe the assignment was late, so that automatically deducts a point, I could put 16 here instead of 17. It will let you override that calculated grade. And you will see here, it gives you this clear override option. That's because there's an overridden grade. If I wanted to revert back to the calculated grade, I would just hit this clear override, and now it's going to be based on what I chose on the rubric. The only thing, if you do override it, it just might not make a lot of sense to whoever's viewing it, the parent, the student, because they're going to be looking at the ratings that they received, and they're not going to understand how it got to the 16 versus the 17 points that they see they should have received. So might need a little bit more of an explanation, maybe a comment on the assignment that lets them know why there wasn't a deduction in points or something. Okay, I'm going to hit clear override, and I'm just going to go back to the 17. I'm satisfied with this grading, so I'm going to go ahead and hit save, and you can see that grade is here. Now, under course options, I'm going to view this course as Chief Blackhawk, who's the student I just gave a grade to. So we're going to view it as Chief, and we're going to see what it looks like under grades when Chief Blackhawk goes and looks at his nouns assignment. There it is. Okay, so you can see here's the assignment and here's the rubric. It shows the 17 out of 20. Now, the student or the parent can click on that rubric icon, and it's going to bring up the rubric so they can see exactly how they were graded and know why they received those points. So that's the nice thing about rubrics, is it gives them an idea about where there needs to be improvement, what they did well at, and maybe why they didn't get the grade they expected to receive. Okay, so that's using rubrics. I'm going to go over to mastery. But first, we're going to go back to the course as a teacher, because it says right now this is how your course looks as Chief Blackhawk. So I want to be back as the teacher. I'm going to hit back to course. Okay, now I'm back as me. Let's talk about mastery for a second. So you notice when we created our rubric, some of the criteria that I used, I did it using learning objectives. And so anytime I use learning objectives, whether that's on a rubric or an individual assignment, it's going to begin to populate this mastery area of Schoology for me. So it's going to bring in all of the different learning standards that are being used in my course, and it's going to let me know how the student is doing in each of those standards. So here we have got a standard, a literacy standard here, okay? And you can see these are the assignments that are using it. So it shows the 2 here. If I hover that over that 2, that means there's 2 assignments using this standard, and it's going to give me the 2 assignments for the student that the standard would use at and what grade they received on those assignments, okay? You will see some of the cells are in different colors. That's because we've defined certain thresholds to determine whether the student is meeting expectation, below expectation, or whatnot. So here in this little gear icon, I can actually define those settings. So you will see here, I can set the achievement levels. I can decide what's the meet expectation. So if I did 50%, 75%, I can change those to whatever I want. So I could make meets expectations, 75, and then I could say this is 90. It's up to me, okay? I'm going to change this back. 50, 75. And then the mastery meet exceed expectation, that at least X amount of assignments had to, using that standard, had to meet or exceed the expectations. So they had to have 50% or more on 5 of them in order to have mastery. Okay, so the grade overall learning objective, you can either do average, you can do the highest score, so if they ever met it or not, or you can also do decaying average as well. I'm just going to leave it at average. And then the mastery scale, you would be able to choose any of the grading scales. It won't let you choose a rubric here, but it will let you choose a grading scale that you want to use for your mastery. I'm going to go ahead and hit save changes on this. Okay, so you will see here again, these are all the standards that are being used in my course. That could be either from a rubric, or I will show you how you can attach a standard to your assignments, and then it's going to bring in those individual standards here. You will see your students and how they are meeting expectations on those standards. You will see for each standard, you will see for that student a number in that standard. That represents how many assignments are using that standard, and by toggling over that number, you will see each assignment that standard is being used in. So here for Vince Julian, you will see he has 3. These are the 3. For Chief Blackhawk, these are the 2. This one is only using 1. Okay. You can also drill down. So I can drill down into this standard, and I can see those assignments broken out now. I can switch back to learning objective. And now what I can see is each standard, and I see a little graph for each assignment where it's being used. And that's going to give me the highest score, the lowest, and the medium. Okay, so you will see that, the highest, lowest, and median. Again, that's for each assignment. I can go back to student achievement, and when I click on that, again, I'm going to come back to this where it's going to break it down by student. Now, the student average is going to take all your students and average the score for that standard. So it just lets you know overall how your course is doing for that standard. Now, you saw where we could add the standards to rubrics, but you can also add them to different material types. You can add them to your tests if you want, if you're using tests and quizzes. So I'm going to come here into our materials and do add material. And I'm just going to say add assignment. Okay, so down here below, anytime you see this little bull's eye, and it turns blue when you hover over it, it's align learning objectives, okay? So as long as you've aligned a learning objective to the assignment, to the test or quiz question, you can't do it for the overall test, but you can do it to specific questions, then that will appear in Mastery for you. So this will bring up, just like it did in the rubrics, this will bring up a list of the learning objectives that you can choose. You can select more than one, and then that will break it down into the Mastery area for you. Okay. One last thing in Mastery, if we just go back to it, you do have some reporting options. So if I click back on this gear icon, I showed you where you could change your Mastery settings, but you also have the ability to do an export. So you can do an export summary, or you can export the details of all students. I'm just going to hit details of all students right now. That's going to open an Excel spreadsheet where you will be able to see everything broken down, all the assignments and the grades by the learning standard. So it's just a really nice spreadsheet that will open in Excel for you. So as soon as you click it, you'll just see it drop to the bottom of your screen in Excel. And then you've got your summary. So take a look at those if you are using Mastery, and just see you do have some data that you can get in an Excel file and then manipulate those files however you need. All right, we'll talk soon.